Hey friends, Catherine here. Today we are going to be going into Bee Talk number 3. This one's going to be all about pollen. Pollen is amazing, and most people know that bees collect and use pollen, but a lot of people don't know even what they use it for, which is kind of awesome. So bees eat pollen. They feed it to their brood. They gather it and they mix it with honey, and that's called bee bread. They use it to build bodies. It's like protein for the bees. It's what they use to develop themselves, which is really awesome. So it's one of the first things that bees use, and the first things bees start collecting in the spring. Before nectar even becomes available, pollen is available. So bees go out and get it and bring it back because they need it. It is the stuff of life. Bees have these little grooves on their hind legs called pollen baskets that they build up static electricity and use the static to hold the pollen to it, like these comparatively big balls of pollen carried on their back legs. But they don't just carry pollen on their back legs. If pollen is really flying, they will douse themselves in pollen, like head to toe, which is really funny when you get some of the oddly colored pollens, because yes, pollen is yellow sometimes. Pollen is also orange and red and white and green. And it can be so cool when you see a bee flying back to the hive coated head to toe in pollen, but that pollen is the color of flamin' hot Cheetos. That can be so amazing. They pull it off of themselves, clump it all together, and shove it into cells like they would store honey, and they just create layers and layers of pollen inside of the cells, and they store that right next to where the brood is because that's easy and convenient and close, so they don't have to go out and search through the hive for pollen to feed the brood. And it's one of the first things that becomes available, and it's available almost year-round. Like, there are parts of the winter when it is not available. For goodness sakes. There are parts of the winter when it is not available, but for the most part, pollen is available most of the year, which is awesome too, because the same cannot be said for other food sources for bees. And yes, bees do eat honey and nectar, but that's not the only thing that they eat. And they gather so much more from their environment than just that, and they bring back water. And pollen is so significant. It's one of the best products of the beehive that even humans, beekeepers, harvest from bees. The primary one being honey, the secondary one being wax, and then the third one being pollen. There are other products too, propolis, royal jelly, but those, honey, wax, and pollen, are the three big ones. Pollen is so great for the bees, and it's so great for the beekeeper too. So it's a super important thing, and there are a lot of things that people who don't keep bees can do to encourage bees, like raising plants that produce a lot of pollen, like dandelions. Dandelions produce a lot of pollen, and it's one of the longest pollen. They're one of the longest pollen producing plants too. So some of the earliest in the spring and some of the latest in the fall. The earliest in the spring being some pollen producing trees, at least in my area in the Pacific Northwest. But there are a lot of different things that make pollen all over the place. And it's one of the things that the bees work hardest to get, and one of the most reliable food sources for bees. It's not the only thing they need. They can't live off of just pollen, just like you can't live off of just bagels. But it's one of the most important foods. So it's a great thing to have, and it's a ready thing. It's a thing that is available almost all the time. So that's fantastic. That's pollen. I think next time we'll talk about honey. That's going to be a big one, I think, a big talk. But this was Bee Talk number 3. I will see you guys all later, and remember to subscribe.